This is the final 2-year, 25,000 mile Tab 320s review. And we're going off the beaten path with this one, out to a little area I call my top secret desert testing grounds. And this starts with our first aspect of this trailer. Is it off-road worthy? The answer is yes and no. Although it says Boondock on the side of this trailer, that does not mean it is an overland trailer. It is still a travel trailer with slightly more ground clearance to it. I definitely recommend you take it easy with this trailer on these really rough dirt roads. Plus, when you're out here dragging a trailer like that, you kind of want to take it nice and easy anyway, because you're going to salt and pepper the nice front end of that trailer with all kinds of rocks and sand. On the last truck, I did have some mud flaps or stone guards on there, and it kind of helped, but not a whole lot. But anyways, once I reach our final camp spot destination here, probably about 15-20 miles out or so, I'm going to crack that trailer apart. I'm going to go in and out of everything and give you my God's honest review of this trailer after 2 years and 25,000 miles of use. All right, I am finally out here, but it is the next morning. When I had originally got out here yesterday, it was a little too hot to be filming in and out of that trailer. Plus, we had a guy's overnight camping trip going on, and I really wanted to capture a lot of that for the next upcoming video that you'll probably see. So now that it's a lot cooler, it's time to jump into the final review of this trailer. And I say final review of this trailer because at 2 years, I figure anything that was gonna break, rattle apart, and crap out on me probably would have done it by now. And anything after this point is just regular wear and tear, I would think, and normal maintenance procedures when it comes to keeping this thing in tip-top shape and in one piece. Now, before I get into this for the last and final time, I do want to make a disclaimer that I am not affiliated with Nucamp, the trailer company. I'm not affiliated with anybody in the RV industry. So when I explain some of these things that went wrong on this trailer, I am definitely not sticking up for the company. What I am looking for is the build quality, fit and finish of the structure and how well the things Nucamp built and put together have done over time. Now, when it comes to many of these components out there, steps, refrigerators, lights, fans, etc., these trailer manufacturers or RV manufacturers do not make some of this junk, and a lot of it is junk. And unfortunately, they don't have many options out there as far as component companies to go to. Some are a little better than others, but that is what it is, and I'll explain that when I get to it. Besides that, this stuff ain't cheap, and I paid a lot of money for it, so believe me, if I'm going to be mad at something, I'm going to be mad at it, because I paid a lot of money for that. Alright, for those of you that have not been watching the channel, this is my 2023 Nucamp Tab 320s Boondock. And we're going to go into the first obvious thing here that I had mentioned when driving in, because many people think this is an off-road trailer. Now, it is kind of. And the reason for that is maybe the design. It sits slightly higher than some, and you have this really nice dovetail coming up in the back that gives you a lot of departure clearance. The torsion axle in there isn't quite off-roady, but it does fairly well at low speeds out here in this kind of junk. Washboard road will rattle just about anything apart. These things aren't really a vehicle, they're not quite a house, they're somewhere in between. So you got to be careful with these things. Like I may have talked about in past videos, what doesn't make this an off-road trailer is this hitch design. On an off-road or overland trailer, you'd want a multi-axis coupler like this, typically called a lock and roll. That way that thing can turn side to side, front to back, and not bind up down here in your ball. Also, it has a traditional trailer tongue jack here, and that thing sticks down kind of low, so if you do come into a steep dip, you're more than likely going to hit that. Now there's some companies out there that make a little thing that you bolt on here. You can twist your jack right out, called a jacky up, and get it out of the way for that reason. And it might make this a little bit more off-road worthy. Now there are 3 other videos in my timeline reviewing this trailer if you want to see a lot more things in depth. So I'm just going to skim over a lot of this stuff fairly quickly. But we're going to go into the good, the bad, and the ugly of this trailer. And we're just going to start out with the ugly. The first major issue I had with this trailer was right up here in the lap seal where the fan bolts to the roof. Now that fan is a Max Air Deluxe fan that I installed later on. Now that may be the only issue I've had that may be manufacturer error. And I say maybe because there are a lot of shady things that go on these RV lots. When you buy a new RV, you need to go inside and out of every nook, cranny, and crevice and note to that RV dealer what's wrong with them and have them fixed. And a good one will have them fixed. But here's what a lot of them do. Rather than just ordering you up a new window or a fan or something like that, they'll typically go and yank something off a similar model and slap it on your model that you're buying to get it out the door as quick as possible. So when it came to this fan and lap seal up there, I'm not 100% sure it was Nucamp's fault, but it could have been. You never know if the RV dealer had to swap that out for another one. Maybe it got damaged in transport, but the issue was that lap seal had a slight leak in it. And what it looked like is somebody had put a lot of lap seal on the top edge of that fan lid, and it had some drippings that were stuck to the actual seal on the roof, and when I opened it, it put a couple little holes in it, and I had a very slight drip. Now luckily, I paid attention to this. I knew we were going to get a rain, so I wanted to do a leak down test and make sure everything was sealed up fairly well. I had taken it to the car wash and tested this and had no issue prior. So what ended up happening is I had a slight drip coming in, and I figured out it was from that lap seal. So I caught it in time. Everything was fine. I went out and I bought more lap seal. I went over it. A year later, I replaced the fan anyway. That Dometic fan that comes in these factory isn't really that good, and it's a lot louder. These Max Air Deluxes are so much better. The next known issue with these trailers, we should say this step, is that the bolts tend to come loose here. And the reason is the step manufacturer was using regular nuts on here with a lock washer. And that's never a good idea to do when you have a pivoting joint to rely on. And thanks to all the forums and pages out there on Tab Stuff, I was already aware of this possible issue, took a look, and I ran out and I grabbed myself some Nylock nuts. And those go on about 6 points under these hinges right here. And that's one of those issues that I would say wasn't Nucamp's. Now, should it be fixed? 100%. Now, Nucamp does not make that step. That step's actually made in Italy, I think. So, I'm not sticking up for anybody here on that, but that is something that I think Nucamp should address to the step manufacturer company. And the best thing to do on all these kind of issues is you call the RV manufacturer or email them and make sure they're aware of these issues so they can tell the companies and suppliers they buy from that they're having an issue. If you just go out there and start complaining all over the internet and forums, they're most likely not going to know about this issue. And I'll tell you right now, after reading tons and tons of stuff on the internet and different groups and forums for different trailers, Nucamp is one of the best at addressing issues over time. They seem to be paying a lot of attention to a lot of the Facebook groups and Instagram groups out there when it comes to these travel trailers. So usually when they're aware of this issue, they will take note and they will make modifications and changes, and you can tell this by model year. Now there are a couple quirky things with this trailer as far as issues go. Another very well-known issue is this kind of cool looking trim molding they put on these trailers. And a lot of people have had problems with that. And the problem is they put this lap facing this way and air can catch under that and tear that thing off going down the road. Now I'm not sure why they designed it that way, but those are just decorative. And I did notice that mine had double-sided tape on some of these edges where I think maybe some of the previous models didn't even have that. So what you'll see is many people out there will go drill a tiny little hole right in here and put a screw in there. But I chose to use these plastic push pin things because this trim molding needs to be able to flex and move and contract in hot and cold. You don't want those all bolted together completely solid, or you'll end up cracking the plastic over time. So what I ended up doing is I put one of those push pin deals in there, and I put one right back in here because those are the only lip edges facing into the wind driving down the road. Now obviously I haven't had a problem with those in 2 years and 25,000 miles, so maybe I was just lucky, but I figured I'd go ahead and do that modification anyway, just in case. Now that there is a Nucamp specific issue. That is their design, they put that together and they make that. But the best thing to do, rather than going out all over the internet and leaving complaints, is you contact your RV manufacturer and make them aware of these issues. If they're a good company over time, they'll make modifications and change that, or they'll reach out to these crappy component companies and hopefully they'll fix their issues. But other than that, I haven't had any issue with this thing on the exterior. And you have to remember, I live out here in the desert and this thing bakes at about 120 degrees. It's baked through 2 summers baking at that temperature. And that takes a toll on a lot of things like plastic. Now, I buff these things out with Meguiar's cleaner wax and it keeps them in tip-top shape. But eventually, out here in the desert, plastics do dry out. Oh, and I almost forgot to add, I did add one of these plastic push pin deals right down in this piece of trim here because that double-sided tape, no matter what double-sided tape I used, would not hold. Once again, a desert issue and the extreme heat. So coming on inside. A while back, I did have one of these really cool push lock latches fail on me, but they're relatively easy and cheap to replace, so not a big deal. And I can't call this quite an issue here, but about 8 months ago I came through and I resealed the bottom of this bathroom with some Geocell ProFlex, I think it was. And everything over here for the most part was just fine, but the issue is up in here. You can see this sealant's pulling away from the wall. That edge is just fine. And I think the reason that is this wall and this wall and maybe the luan up in the roof are the only wood structures in this trailer. And wood does what wood does, and it'll expand and contract depending on temperatures. And that's even with me going back over that and filling this gap. And the funny thing is, at times you'll see this gap actually completely close up depending on the temperature. So sometime when it starts to cool off again, I'm going to have to redo that. And I'm going to try to come up with a very unconventional way to get around fixing that issue. But really, I think that's the only interior issue I've had with this trailer so far. And that's not really that big of a deal. That wall's pretty much sealed all the way down. Like I said, I'll have to come up with some other way to seal that gap. Something that can handle that little bit of expansion and contraction. And I'm pretty sure that's what it is. These walls are fairly solid in here, so I don't think they're moving around too much going down the road. I have had some very minor wood splitting here as it's been drying out, but that is all it has done in 2 years. That's pretty good for wood baking out here at 120 degrees in the desert. What I'll end up doing is getting a little touch-up stain and going over those little tiny splits, and it'll be good as new. And some people in the past have had issues with this thing kind of rattling apart from its screws, but mine's been fairly solid, so they must have changed something in that design. So far, so good. And at least it is actual wood. After I first bought this trailer, I went through the whole thing inside and out. I got the correct screwdriver for these and just came in and checked everything to make sure everything was snug. Anywhere I could find a screw, nut, or bolt, inside, outside, and underneath. And everything was fairly snug and tight. And every once in a while, these stupid plastic strips and the LEDs up in here tend to sag down or pop out. All I did was take some crystal clear Gorilla Tape, put in a few sections, and that holds that in place. So I think those are about the only issues I've had with this trailer so far. I did have a drum or hub on this trailer go out, but that was after a year, and the place I had it fixed at told me that is a common issue. Some of these brake drum manufacturers probably don't have the casting perfect, so there might be a little wobble in there, and what happened is when you adjust your drum brakes, if you get a little too dialed in like I do, that little bit of uneven wobble will rub your brake shoes and heat things up, and I think that's what happened. It was either that or they said I could have hit a pothole or something on the highway, and that probably put just a slight wobble in that drum. But that's all on the brake drum company. So in retrospect, over the last 2 years and 25,000 miles, I would say those are some pretty minor issues. Now there's some out there that have some issues, and who knows what was going on there. Maybe that was a Monday or a Friday, and maybe those workers were tired or wanted to go home. Who knows? Sometimes good help is hard to find, trust me. But like I said, if you buy one of these new, you make sure you go inside and out of everything and point that out to the RV dealer before you leave the lot or buy this thing, and you have them fix whatever issue there is. Oh, and I forgot the Wifeco converter down here. That is supposed to be auto tech to lithium battery mode, and no matter what you do, that thing did not auto detect and change over to a lithium profile. In the end, that actually works out pretty good for me. I use the solar on the roof to top up my lithium battery to the correct charge parameters for that anyway. So let's talk about the bed here, sleeping in this bed after all that time. So what you have here are 2 slides that come out on each side to make about a queen size bed. But I typically just use this side, and that cushion of course comes down and out to there. And I typically fold the backrest down, and I just kind of lay at a slight curve this way or kind of curve in that way because I'm lazy. Now when I really want to get a good night's sleep, I'll fold the whole bed out and sprawl out any way I want. But as far as comfort goes, this side here is fairly comfortable and soft. When you get up in here on these cushions, they're wood backed, and it gets a little bit stiffer feeling in there. So you could use that to your advantage. Maybe you want to put this together and sleep on the soft half, have somebody sleep across on the firmer half. But overall, I think it could be a little bit more comfortable, but for a trailer this size and what they got going on here, it definitely beats sleeping in the back of my truck or on a thin camping pad while out camping in a small tent. But if I want extra comfort on that side, I have an Xped Mega Mat that's a self-inflating mattress, and I just throw that over top. And I know there are many out there that use maybe a foam topper that they can roll up to the back for storage wise, and when they need it, they just roll that foam topper right on out, and then everything should be fairly comfortable. And as far as the lagoon table goes, since it's just me camping, I kind of fold it up all compact like this and just set her on over here. Typically that table goes right down in there, turns into a dinette. There's also one of these mounts on this trailer out here on the campsite if you want to put your table outside. So now I'm going to show you the guts, innards, and workings of this trailer. Under this cushion here is where your Aldi and water piping are. And for those that don't know what an Aldi is and never seen one, it is a radiant heat system. There's a boiler inside of this thing. This is how you get your hot water and your heating for your trailer. What it does is it runs a kind of glycol antifreeze solution through these pipes all in and around this trailer to little radiators. And it warms this whole trailer up fairly silently. You don't hear any blower fans or any of that kind of stuff. At different altitudes you will hear a fan kick on in here to feed it more air in thin atmosphere. But other than that, it's fairly silent. Over in there is where all your water connections and valves come in at, in the Nautilus system. Of course, your water pump. And everything's fairly easily accessible over here. This will be your hot and cold mixing valve. And back up here under the backrest you have a slight amount of storage. It's kind of hard to get to, but it is some. And when it comes to these backrests, you have kind of three modes here. You have full upright for the dinette, full flat, and reclined. You also have a couple little storage pockets back here. And of course you get some nice cabinets in the back side here. Now if you're going to be laying with your head under here, I recommend maybe flipping up this cabinet, because you can whack your head on that. And the next best thing to do is lay with your head to the front of the trailer and put your feet under there. And for taller people out there, you'd probably want to sleep over here on the campsite and let your feet hang off of the bed a little bit. But this little trailer is definitely not made for tall people. As you can see here, I am about 5'7", and at this point I'm just about touching the top of the trailer, but I have plenty of room all the way over here to the kitchen. But when it comes to the shower, you have a very slight step up, and even I touch my head right up in here. But it doesn't really matter, because the shower faucet thing here comes up, gets placed up here, and I just keep my head down. Or you can sit on the cassette toilet and shower down that way. The head height in here doesn't really bother me. It would be nice to have a little more, like in the Nucamp 360, but you kind of get used to doing things in a certain way, and having a tiny bathroom and shower in such a tiny trailer while out camping is actually pretty nice. Alright, now coming over to the campside of the bed here, I have a lot of people that ask me about the air conditioning in this model tab, and that is right under here. That is what you call the L-Well Air-8 system. And this little guy works out pretty good. It pumps out a crazy amount of air, believe it or not. It's almost like having a car air conditioner in your travel trailer. And for any of those out there wondering how you get to the filter on this, there are a couple tabs right here on this side and one back up under these hoses that you press down, pull that grate out, and that's how you get to the air filter on that thing. And just like this side, behind this backrest, you do have a little bit of storage down in there for something. Not easy to get to, but it is something. And coming up on this side here, has a nice little stereo, a microwave, and a DC powered TV that works out pretty well. There are a lot of people that ask about the microwave and whether or not I like having it or I'd rather remove it for a little more storage. And honestly, I don't mind having it. If I have short power, I have my generator, it's just a lot easier for me to throw in some cheap microwave meals or maybe even warm up some leftovers on a trip. So it is kind of nice for me to have that along. I don't really need the extra storage. On this side is the air conditioning controls for the L-Well Air-8, which will only run on AC power, shore power, or a generator. Right up in here is your Alta system. And all your buttons and controls here. You got your hot water on and off, your temperature setting. And by the way, this heater will run on electric or gas. Right now I have it set in gas mode. And on electric, you can set this to 1 or 2 kilowatts of power. If you really want it to warm up fast on electric, you're going to need to use 2 kilowatts. But if your trailer is already warm, you can leave it on 1 kilowatt and it should be just fine. You can also run this heater gas and electric at the same time to heat it up even quicker. Let's talk about the little refrigerator in here. For me, it works out just fine. You get a little freezer. It's just enough room to put some groceries for a few days, and this thing's been going strong for the last 2 years. Now the only kind of issue I have with this is in summer this thing does struggle a little bit to stay cool. Not much, just a little bit. And the reason for that is when this trailer is baking at 110 degrees in here, it's very hard for this thing to keep up, obviously. So it is weather dependent on where you're camping, like most fridges if you have them outdoors. So now we jump into the next part of this, modifications that I've done to make things a little better. Where are all the updates? I found these very tiny 40mm fans on Amazon that go right here above the refrigerator vent. And what was happening is, I think there was just a lot of hot air from this refrigerator being trapped in there. So these things are just hooked up by regular USB connections. I just zip tied them onto the grate with the wind direction facing outward to extract any heat. And so far I've had some pretty good results. I've noticed this refrigerator isn't running as much once it gets down to cool. And I can definitely feel that heat when those things are turned on. Might be kind of hard to see up in here, but in my model tab I had a little slot and I just ran that USB fan connection right here, ran the wiring around the back of this cabinet, and I plugged it in right down there in the tab's USB port. These fans have an off, low, medium, and high setting. So depending on the season, I can choose whether or not to run these or how high I want those fans to run. Pretty simple and easy. And by the way, it is nice that Nucamp uses legit wood steel. Now, even though these are kind of like laminate finished out now, they're not the really nice cabinetry of the past, but I'm glad it is wood and not that fiberboard crap they're putting in all these trailers these days. I don't know how many trailers I've seen on the lot with screws that are already rattled apart and fell out just by being transported to the dealership, because they're screwed into fiber junk. But the smart thing to do is you always make sure that all your hardware, inside and out, hinges, are just snug. Every so often, I do it about every 6 months, I would say now, and nothing's really come loose. I mean, you don't want to crank down on this stuff. Just make sure it's not loose. Like all vehicles, things, homes, etc., these things require maintenance, upkeep, care, and periodic checking, especially for something like this that's going down the road in a hurricane and an earthquake trying to rattle itself apart. And back to the next modification here. Since this is a cassette toilet, I MacGyvered up my own vent fan system here. Maybe a little hard to hear on camera, but you can kind of hear it out here coming out of the vent pipe. And what I did was, I tapped into some wiring over here. Ran my wiring back to there, up through here to that switch. And right in here, I made a little fan system. And how that works is, at the bottom of this cassette tank, or crapper suitcase as I call it, this little vent gets pushed up and it opens up a vent passageway into the cassette tank. And why I decided to MacGyver up that modification was, there's a company out there called an SOG or SOG system kit, and they have one that taps in to this cap, runs a fan and a hose and a charcoal filter to this door. But I wanted to come up with something a lot more simple than that and just use what was in there. I had to cut that vent pipe and hodgepodge some parts together and buy a special 40mm fan. But I'll tell you what, it's working pretty good. And the reason for doing that was these little tiny bathrooms don't have an exhaust fan system in there. So when you open that flapper, especially if you have your main roof vent facing backwards, it'll draw any of that smell up and out of that crapper tank. And I think most RVs are probably that way if you left the valve open. But more so on the cassette, since it's so small. This trailer is a small, tight, confined space, and any little bit of draw in there can pull that smell right up and out of this trailer through that vent pipe in the cassette. Now, when it came to that, I found this newer version of this fan that I mentioned in the last video. And that new fan is a lot louder, but it works great at camp, unfortunately, once again. And how I use that bathroom with that setup is, I open the flapper, I do my business, and any smell in there is being drawn right out. Almost none of that smell ends up in the bathroom while you're doing your business. In fact, that works better than a regular bathroom extraction fan. But the main purpose was while traveling with a full cassette. When I'd get to the dump station, the inside of that trailer was smelling pretty bad. So I finally found this newer high-speed fan that really draws a lot of smell and air out of that tank. And I was really hoping it would eliminate that smell in the trailer while transporting it to the dump station to be dumped. And unfortunately, guys, it didn't really work. Once again. Now it does help, but I think the best thing to do is, if you can dump your cassette before you leave camp, even if you don't rinse that cassette fully until you get to a dump station, that's probably going to be the best thing as far as traveling with a full cassette. I was really hoping that little fan was going to do the trick, and I mean, it is pulling a lot of smell and air out of that. So if that can't do it, I don't know what else will. But at least at camp, while it's in use, that thing works absolutely phenomenal for that. So I think I'll keep that system in place and keep using it for just doing my business while I'm at camp, because it works phenomenal in that way at least. But man, I was really hoping that was going to solve that issue of traveling with a full cassette. And on to the next mod that so many people ask me about. How did I get a backup camera to work on the back of this trailer, and where did I put it? Well, that's about where I put it. This right here is called a Doe Honest wireless backup camera. It has a battery inside that you can charge, a little tiny solar panel up top that kind of trickle charges it and gives you an extra amount of run time. I think I've ran this 15 to 17 total hours. And this is the second one. I had an issue with the screen on the first one, but it's been doing fairly well. That thing is worth its weight, especially as a solo camper traveler. It's nice to be able to see behind you. Plus, the base on this thing is magnetic, so you can do this and pull that thing right off and use it anywhere you want to. And those that have been watching, you know I use this many times to set kind of on the ground while I'm backing up. If I put a block under the uneven side of this trailer, that way I can see exactly when that tire ends up on top of the leveling block. But since this tab is aluminum, magnets don't stick to aluminum, and I had to fabricate a tiny steel plate just like that. And for those wondering how I got that on there, I used some really good double-sided tape all over that thing and really cleaned and prepped that surface before I stuck it on. And you'll also want to give that a couple days to adhere before you end up putting any kind of weight or load on it. And I did paint that, and somebody was asking me how it's holding up. Well, pretty good. But that was a temporary thing that's actually kind of worked out. But I do need to take that off eventually and have that thing powder coated with a thicker paint. But out here in the West, we don't really have a problem with rust issues, so I'm not real worried about it. But you just take this thing on an angle very carefully, set it on there, and this thing is on there rock solid. But I think why that sticks on so well is this surface isn't completely straight up and down, it's on a slight slope. So that tape is actually holding really well, and I can't believe that. That's been on there for probably about 1.5 years. And that little screen just gets mounted up here. I do have a fancy dash mount, but it comes with a little suction cup thing that you could put up on your window anywhere you want. And it just uses one of these things to plug into your DC power. You have a little button to turn it on and off. It also comes with another inline version that has a little button and you can plug it into a USB. But extremely simple and effective and cheap. I think this thing's like $100. And by the way, I'll try to put some links to some of this stuff in the description for you, since so many people ask about all these gadgets. The other gadget I added was a tire minder TPMS sensor. And right now you can see it flashing because my tires are sitting at 32 PSI, which is way under. But I air my tires down just slightly when I'm going off-road at low speeds so I don't rattle my trailer apart. Now, I don't recommend doing that unless you know what you're doing, and your tires must be aired back up before you hit pavement. But I don't recommend doing that because you never know, that might stress that tire and you might have a blowout. But I'll be the guinea pig on that one for you. But this thing here is nice to have because it'll tell your tire pressure, obviously. It also tells you your temperatures. And it's fairly accurate. I think it's like 1 PSI off. I have noticed where I've seen a little bit of an excessive temp here, more than 10 degrees. This thing can be about 10 degrees off depending on side or which side's in the sun. But if it's like 20, 30 over, you know you got an issue. And that is what definitely saved me when I had that brake drum rubbing, creating a lot of heat in there. I noticed the temperature was slightly higher than usual when I pulled off to check it, and it was correct. And also, if those tire pressures drop too quick, you know you better pull over before you have a blowout or a flat. But the sensors just go right on to the end of your valve stem. They have a little battery in there, and I think I have to change them out about every 6 months. I do want to note that you should probably get some metal valve stems for your wheels if you're going to put these on, because the weight of these slinging around actually touches your wheel and eventually yanks on those rubber valves and wears them out. But a very neat and effective little system to kind of warn you of anything that could possibly going wrong with your tire or wheel or hub area back here. And when it comes to this gauge itself, you can plug this thing into a USB, or it has its own little solar panel if you stick this up on your windshield to keep it charged. Pretty cool. So the next and last set of mods that I've done, I've upped my battery capacity to a 100 amp hour lithium battery by SunGold Power. That 100 amp hours of lithium makes all the difference over an AGM, let me tell you what. Now, if I were going to do that again, I would at least go with 200 amp hours of lithium, especially if you're in a kind of lower light or cloudier area. But for me, it's just enough, and it's working out just fine. A friend and I also built this dividing wall between the propane and the battery box area. And up in here, this is where I have my tire minder relay mounted. This thing here is a control unit because I mounted rock lights under my trailer to kind of mimic what they're doing on the new trailer with the underglow. And my model tab never came with an external solar charge controller, so I mounted that here. It runs directly to the battery, and I have a little SAE port that I have yet to drill a hole and mount on the outside of this box that I can plug in an external solar panel to. Get out here in the shade. It's a little warm here today. I think we're getting up to about 87. But when it comes to adding a lithium battery to a trailer with non-lithium charge capabilities or monitoring capabilities, my advice is you get a lithium battery that, number one, has all the proper charge protections from high, low temp, high voltage, low voltage cutoff, etc. But you need one with a Bluetooth module installed so you can run an app to monitor that lithium battery correctly. Your little dum-dum light gauges inside the trailer aren't going to work right. The voltage in a lithium battery and the charge profile, meaning how it drains coming downhill, is not like a regular lead acid or AGM. So to know the exact state of charge, you need to have the Bluetooth battery to an app. Unless you want to hardwire a specific gauge to monitor that battery into the trailer. But it's a lot easier just to get one with an app to check your phone. Now when it comes to charging that battery, since my tab wasn't set up with a lithium package or the charging parameters to charge lithium, because the Wifeco Auto Detect never auto detects lithium like it's supposed to, I decided to leave that alone. Because the tab has solar on the roof, and that solar charge controller is located in the trailer. So I set that solar charge controller to charge at a lithium parameter to bring that battery up to 14.4 volts that it needs. So if you relied on a lead acid or AGM charge rate, your lithium battery wouldn't be fully charged. It'd probably be somewhere around 80%. Depending on the battery manufacturer type, you need to get up to a certain amount of voltage so you start hitting cell balance. And from what I've noticed with my battery anyway, they have a little BMS or battery monitoring system control unit computer inside these batteries now. It starts to balance right around 13.4, 13.6. You can see all the cells coming across, nice and even. And I think they do that on purpose so you can run these batteries off of a regular AGM lead acid charge rate. But I highly recommend either buying a lithium battery specific charger or using your solar charger set to the correct parameters to do that. And the reason for adding the second charge controller up front is it was advised against to wire directly into the existing charge controller that was already in the tab for the solar on its roof. Now, if you upped the size of the charge controller to a higher voltage, higher amperage one and replaced it, you probably could tie in your external and your roof at the same time. But I chose to go completely separate so I can monitor each source separately of each other. And for externally charging, I upgraded my fold-out solar panel to a Renogy 200-watt panel. And if you're going to go with a fold-out panel and you have the money, I recommend just moving up to 200 watts of solar and getting it over with. 100 watts will do pretty good, but 200's where you want to be. Now, there are many questions on solar out there, and I am no professional, but many want to put solar up on the roof of the trailer if they do not have it. And it is kind of convenient to have it up there, but you're not always parked in the optimum direction for sunlight, and you could also be parked under a tree in shade. So I would recommend to have a small panel on the roof, but more importantly, have an external fold-out one with an extension cable that you could set way out there in the sun if you want to keep your trailer nice and cool and under the shade. So as far as if you do not have solar on your trailer already, I would highly recommend just buying a fold-out style panel. It's a lot easier, cheaper, and more effective to do it that way. At least I think so. One of the other kind of neat mods I thought was going to be absolutely useless and I'm really liking is I decided to add a set of these snap pads to my stabilizers. That way I don't have to set them up on a plastic block all the time. And so far, I'm really liking that idea. These things are working out pretty well. They're a little pricey for chunks of rubber, but very, very convenient. And they actually do help you stabilize your trailer a lot better, especially on maybe like asphalt or cement or something. That way you don't have that metal pad rubbing around on the ground or kind of sitting there wobbling and walking around as you're in your trailer. These really have helped out keeping this trailer a lot more stable when they're down. I'll tell you what, I'm actually kind of in disbelief that they work that well. One of the first mods I had done when I got this trailer is I changed out the shore power connection to an RV smart plug. For that, you will have to drill, I think it was 2 new holes since the original had 3. But that went in pretty easily and nicely, and that is a way better shore power connection. Look at the size of those contact points. Now you can get that as a retrofit kit where you put the plug end onto your existing shore power cable, or you can buy their cable and this. But it is a little pricey, but if you do a lot of hooking up, I highly recommend going with this system. That is so much nicer and a lot more safe with those contacts and this seal point. That should definitely come from the factory like that. So now that we've gone through the ugly or bads of this trailer and all my modifications that I've done to this trailer, now we'll get into the good. And maybe some things that I think could be improved upon. Although my opinion really doesn't matter much because everybody has different likes and dislikes and different ways to use their camper. But we're going to go over the things I think could be improved upon. Number 1 being the design of this trim. If Nucamp can reverse the overlapping of this and that back section, I think that would totally get out the kinks of that design of this kind of trim rail over the top. But like I said, I haven't had an issue yet. I guess I've been lucky. Probably not very doable, but I wish they could implement more of an actual off-road suspension in this thing so it would ride a lot smoother off-road. And the next thing they could probably do is having a factory vent system installed in that cassette toilet. That would be pretty cool if they could implement that. And coming back to the plug here for shore power, I think Nucamp should just start installing these smart plugs in all their units. So much better. They should also just offer that Max Fan Deluxe roof fan direct from the factory. That thing is so much better than that Dometic unit. But other than that, I think this unit is absolutely perfect. Now there are kind of two downfalls to owning one of these. Number one, that fancy Alda heating system in there. Every 2 years, you have to have that glycol solution in there flushed out so it keeps working and it doesn't corrode anything in there. And that's a little expensive. It's somewhere around $600 to have Truma do that, if you can find a Truma guy to do that flush. But that $600 in maintenance cost every 2 years, at least to me, is totally worth it to have near silent heating in that trailer. And that heating system is extremely efficient in that thing. The little fan inside, or little pump that pumps the glycol around the trailer, hardly uses any power. And of course you can run it on gas or electric. It doesn't use very much gas. And that definitely keeps that trailer nice and toasty. Now this is a 3-season trailer. This is not rated for full winter camping. You wouldn't want to push this below freezing temps. Meaning, if your daytime temp isn't at least 20 degrees above freezing, then you probably shouldn't have water in your trailer. Now, there are people out there that do winterize these things and drain them of water, and you can still use that heating system in there. Now, the lowest temp I've pushed this thing down to was 20 at night and about 45 during the day. And I was only camping in that for about 2 days, and I would say that was pushing it. So don't take my advice on that. But if you emptied all the water out of that thing, blew the lines out, winterized it, you could definitely probably use that into way colder temperatures. And for those that watched my extreme heat testing video, that little LOL Air 8 just barely kept up when it was about 119 degrees outside and in that trailer when I got to camp. Now that AC was running full blast almost the whole time until sometime a couple hours after dusk. It finally cycled off and back on like normal. So that was really pushing that air conditioning system, like most travel trailers. Plus, you don't want to be camping in that kind of weather anyway. But by far, the biggest downfall to owning this trailer is that every time you stop somewhere, stop to get gas, you're probably going to have to give people a tour. I wouldn't say that's quite a downfall, but this little trailer definitely draws a lot of attention. And I'll tell you what, it's because it looks so darn cool. I've given so many people peeks and tours of the inside of this thing, and they are absolutely blown away that there's so much stuff packed into that little trailer, especially a bathroom and a shower. But I'm quite used to that, being a car guy or hot rodder, and getting a lot of attention when it comes to stopping at gas stations and giving a mini tour or putting on a mini car show. The funny thing is, when I had that Tacoma, I got just as much of attention with that truck as I did maybe my 68 Camaro or 89 Honda CRX or even this trailer. Unfortunately, the new F-150 here gets no attention. That is until I start modifying and making it a heck of a lot cooler. But overall, I absolutely love this trailer. And any of those issues that I may have had, I think are probably nil compared to many of the horror stories I read online about other travel trailers out there. But we'll see how she does in the years and miles down the road to come. Alright everybody, it's time for me to hit the dusty trail and get the heck out of here. It's getting pretty warm, and that truck and trailer definitely need a bath. Plus, I think I've talked way too much about this tiny little trailer, so this is going to be my last and final tab review video. Now I'm pretty sure I left out a lot of stuff here, and if you're new here and you care to see a lot more in-depth videos on this little Tab 320S, I have a 6-month, 1 year, and 1.5 year review video somewhere down there in my video list if you want to scroll on down and hunt for those. But at this point, I just keep jibber-jabbering about the same old stuff. So from here on out, anything that may go wrong or anything I do or add to it, I'll just kind of update you in the camping videos as I go along here. But overall, I've been 100% satisfied and pleased with that tiny trailer. Now, as far as the next camping video goes, I'll probably be heading north once again because it's still a little too warm to be out here and enjoy a whole day or two of camping. And then sometime after that, I will be dropping the Halloween camping video, which actually took place last night, but you're going to see it a lot later. Nothing too crazy, just a short overnight hanging out next to the fire with a couple buddies, talking about some of the strange things we've seen out here camping or out in the wilds. And believe me, there'll be some strange stories, maybe even some strange people. And as usual, this video has run way too darn long, so I'll see you all in the next adventure. Almost forgot my phone again.